Montreal is not a city you associate with transit-oriented development. The typical metro station is surrounded by medium-density walk-ups, and where higher density does exist is not necessarily correlated with transit. But while it's still no Vancouver or Washington, D.C., Montreal has been building more density near transit over the past 2 decades than you probably realize. In this video, we're going to check in on some TOD around the city to explain the promising potential and the fundamental problem with transit-oriented development. This area just past Angrignon Metro Station used to be industrial but has been densifying since the early 2000s. It's on the edge of LaSalle, a post-war suburban neighborhood that's decently dense but pretty car-centric, with large roads and larger malls. The buildings here go up to 16 stories, and 4,000 people lived here as of 2021, but that's still increasing as more buildings open. This area is an interesting test of the definition of walkability. If you're just counting proximity to destinations, this is one of the most walkable areas out there with a walk score of 85. On one side, you have a metro station that can get you downtown in just 20 minutes, and on the other side, you have one of the biggest malls in the city with almost anything you could ever need, including a Boston Pizza. You also have a large and pretty nice park that shares its name with the metro station. At the same time, the actual experience of walking here is not very pleasant. The roads are large and the sidewalks are small, especially for the volumes of pedestrians that come through here. It's honestly maddening seeing people with walkers, strollers, or mobility scooters navigate an environment like this. Tell us again how car-oriented environments are good for people with disabilities. The intersections are spaced out to prioritize car traffic, and you get a lot of people walking across the road and having awkward interactions with drivers. Once you get to the shopping center, you have to go through a sea of parking to get to your store. Even the housing feels at least a little hostile. From missed pedestrian connections to no trespassing signs. This is functional walkability more than enjoyable walkability, and it's worse on a bike. On the bright side, there are 2 new parks here, one of which does add a useful walking shortcut, and this large road is actually planned for bike lanes in the next few years, which will be an enormous improvement in cycling connectivity. There's also been talk of redeveloping some of the malls into mixed-use, dense neighborhoods, and the owner of this one asked the city permission to increase the allowed height from 6 to 16 stories, like the existing developments nearby. This TOD behind Namur Metro Station is called the Triangle, and it's also a light industrial and commercial area that's been building housing, which tops out at 12 or so stories, since the early 2000s. As of 2021, roughly 5,000 people lived in these newer developments, and that's still increasing. The environment within the neighborhood is quite nice. Old industrial roads dominated by asphalt were completely transformed into newer, more human-scale corridors, with much more greenery. The paving stones are an extra nice touch. Montreal uses these way more than any other North American city we know of. They look nice and signal that this is a neighborhood space where cars don't necessarily dominate. The areas between buildings are also better designed and connected, compared to the Angrignon TOD we saw before. Rather than parking and no trespassing signs, we have pedestrian pathways, parks, seating, and greenery. There's a grocery store in the development, so a lot of people have this as their grocery walk. Not bad. However, once you leave the neighborhood, the environment changes completely. 1 block over is the Descaries Expressway, one of the most horrendous pedestrian experiences in the city, easily worse than anything by the last TOD near Angrignon Station. Walking or cycling here regularly probably takes years off your life expectancy when you consider stress, pollution, and the chance of getting hit by a car. It should go without saying that this is a complete no-go zone for younger kids independently getting around their city. The Triangle is also bordered by Jean Talon Street, which despite being the only direct connection to the neighborhood from the east, is the kind of large arterial road where drivers honk at cyclists and close past them. There is some hope for the area though. Jean Talon is planned for an express bike corridor with wide and direct bike lanes like this, which will be a complete game changer for bike connectivity in this part of the city, linking with this nice bike lane that was built a few years ago but doesn't really go anywhere yet. There's also been talk of a tramway or maybe a bus rapid transit corridor to connect to the future housing development on this former raceway. But that still leaves the monstrosity of the sunken highway des Carrés. There was talk of covering one small section of it outside of the metro station, but the highway really is an enormous scar through the area that residents of these new neighborhoods will have to hear, see, breathe, and interact with for decades to come. Not far from the triangle is another development called Westbury that also has a really stark dichotomy between urbanism within the neighborhood and a hostile environment outside. Within the site, there's a park, and many of the apartments open onto a nice pedestrian pathway. The other street that accesses the hotel, grocery store, and other stores is one way, relatively narrow and slow. But if you want to go to the metro station or most of the other stores nearby, you need to spend a lot of time walking through this exceptionally unpleasant environment. The walk to the metro station is only 10 minutes or so, but it probably feels longer here. Our final case study of TOD is Nuns Island, which is different from the others. Rather than adding density near existing metro stations, the housing on this corner of Nuns Island started to be built a decade before the REM station opened in 2023. This area also has a bigger range of density and housing types compared to the last three examples, from townhouses to mid-rises, and taller, thinner high-rises reaching 30 stories and beyond. Aesthetically, the blue glass feels a little less Montreal, and maybe more Vancouver, compared to the red and beige brick facades of some of the other developments. 2,000 people lived here on this corner of Nuns Island as of the 2021 census, although that's still increasing. The urban environment here is a mixed bag. It doesn't have the narrower streets and nice paving stones of the Triangle or Westbury. There's more surface parking, and there's a surprising number of no trespassing signs and locked gates, even just trying to get to the nice multi-use pathway along the river. This pedestrian plaza right in front of a building has a prominent private property sign, giving off gated community vibes. The neighborhood is also surrounded by highways that you have to cross if you want to go anywhere. On the other hand, the cycling connections are quite good, both to other parts of Nuns Island and to mainland Montreal. Nuns Island is covered by multi-use pathways that make it very easy to bike, even through the roundabouts. And while the highway isn't the nicest, it's substantially less disruptive and dangerous than des Carrés, because most of the traffic doesn't leave the highway, and there are multiple ways to cross with minimal interaction with cars. Unlike des Carrés, Nuns Island is actually an area your kids could explore and get around independently after a certain age. The multi-use pathways even have indicators for kids pointing them in the direction of their school. TOD in Montreal looks a little different than in other North American cities. With common building heights of 8, 12, or 16 stories, it occupies a middle ground between the shorter 5/1s that you see in a lot of US cities like Seattle and Denver, and the taller, often thinner towers of Toronto or Vancouver. Montreal is also above average on street design within these neighborhoods, although that's not universal. But in a lot of other ways, TOD in Montreal is similar to other cities, and it shows some of the core challenges with this kind of development. But first, the positives. TOD can be an excellent way to add a bunch of housing and pair it with transit, which is good for the people living there and for the broader city. These 4 sites together house between 10 and 15,000 people, all within a 20-minute transit ride of downtown, and they're very much still growing. It's exciting seeing new neighborhoods develop, and it's clear that new density can be a catalyst for pedestrian, cycling, and transit improvements nearby. But there's a major problem or challenge, which is that TOD can feel like it's throwing density into a car-centric environment and telling it to swim. The stations selected for this kind of development are often the ones that have a lot of available commercial and industrial land with fewer neighbors to complain. You end up with a lot of environments that are unpleasant or even hostile to people outside of a car. People who move in here don't get to enjoy the nice urban environments that Montreal is known for. Instead of this, they get this. And while improvements are happening, they can take years or decades. The first residents of some of these buildings moved in around 2005. They've waited 10, 20, or stretching into the future even 30 or 40 years for some of the key walking, cycling, and transit improvements. Some things like the Descaries Expressway are probably going to outlive most of us. None of this is to say that we should press pause on TOD and not develop these areas. Build, baby, build. But it's important to stress how big of a challenge it can be to urbanize the suburbs, especially starting from commercial and industrial areas. We should recognize what we're doing, which is concentrating housing into some unpleasant, unhealthy, and even dangerous environments, especially for children or people with disabilities. We should be faster and more ambitious in improving these environments, and we should consider allowing and encouraging extra density near transit stations located in environments that don't have so many inherent livability, health, and safety problems like Nuns Island. TOD in places like this is a win, but it's only the first step in a very long road of building livable neighborhoods in hostile environments. We'd love to hear from you in the comments about your city and what kind of environments, good and bad, get developed as TOD.
Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And a special thanks to our supporters on Patreon.